My law partner didn't confront me. He didn't file a complaint. He didn't say a word. Instead, he tried to humiliate me every morning, quietly, methodically, and publicly. So I ended it without ever raising my voice. And he never tried it again. If you've ever worked with someone who smiled in meetings but disrespected you behind the scenes, you're going to love this one. Hit subscribe, tap like, and comment below if you believe the most satisfying revenge is the kind that leaves the other person with no defense. Let's get into it. I used to be a partner at a law firm. Not an associate, not someone trying to prove themselves. A partner, someone who had already paid their dues. Years of late nights. Weekends eaten by deadlines. Relationships sacrificed quietly in the background. At that level, you expect a certain amount of mutual respect. You expect disagreements to be professional. And you expect that the petty, high school level nonsense is long behind you. I was wrong. Because about 10 years ago, one of my partners, let's call him Chad, decided he didn't like my desk. Not my work. Not my results. Not the money I brought into the firm. My desk. It was cluttered, stacks of paper in uneven piles. Copies of documents I was actively working with. Nothing missing. Nothing lost. To me, it was organized chaos. I knew exactly where everything was. To Chad? It was an opportunity. It started small, the way this kind of thing always does. A sideways glance in partner meetings. A comment delivered with a laugh so it sounded harmless. Man, Chad would say, leaning back in his chair, I'd lose my mind working at that desk. A few chuckles from around the table. Nothing confrontational enough to call out. Nothing serious enough to respond to aggressively, and that was intentional. Then came the firm events. Holiday parties. Networking mixers. Places where you're supposed to smile and represent the firm like everything is perfect. That desk of yours really says a lot, Chad would say, just loudly enough for people nearby to hear. You know the type of comment. The kind that hangs in the air just long enough to embarrass you, then disappears under polite laughter. People looked at me, waiting for my reaction. And every time I smiled, I tilted my head like I was amused, and said, if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, of what, then, is an empty desk a sign? Einstein. It always got a reaction. Some people laughed. Some nodded. And Chad? He hated it. Because he wasn't trying to debate philosophy. He was trying to establish dominance. After a while, the comments stopped escalating verbally. And that's when I knew something was coming. Because people like Chad don't walk away when they don't get the response they want. They change tactics. They look for leverage. Our offices were arranged around the interior wall of the building. Each attorney had a private office with a door, and next to that door was a tall window made of clear glass. From the hallway or cubicle area, anyone walking by could see inside. There were blinds on the windows. Here's the key part, those blinds could only be opened from inside the office. Most of us kept them closed. Privacy mattered. Focus mattered. I always kept mine closed. Until one morning, I didn't. I stopped in front of my office door and immediately noticed it. The light was wrong. Brighter. Exposed. I looked up. My blinds were wide open. My desk, my cluttered, uneven piles of paper, was on full display to anyone walking past. For a few seconds, I just stood there. No anger. Just confusion. Cleaning crew, maybe? I closed the blinds, went inside, and got to work. Professionals don't jump to conclusions. The next day? Same thing. Blinds wide open again. This time, people were already in the hallway. Walking. Looking. No one said anything. But I could feel it. That subtle awareness that something private had been exposed. I closed the blinds again. And that's when my jaw tightened. This went on for 2 full weeks. Every night, I left my office with the blinds shut. Every morning, I arrived to find them open. I checked other offices. Partners who always closed their blinds, still closed. Same day. Same time. Which told me everything I needed to know. And then the final puzzle piece clicked. Chad always arrived early. Earlier than almost anyone else. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't cleaning staff. This was deliberate. Here's something Chad clearly didn't understand. At a law firm, especially among partners, there's an unspoken rule: you do not mess with another partner's office. You don't touch their things. You don't rearrange their space. And you do not try to embarrass them like they're a subordinate. But Chad wasn't interested in respect. He wanted me uncomfortable. Visible. Embarrassed. And suddenly, all those past comments made sense. This wasn't about a desk. This was about control. I considered confronting him. Walking into his office. Closing the door. Having a calm conversation like professionals. And I imagined how it would go. The denial. The fake confusion. Oh, really? That's strange. Must be maintenance. Why are you so sensitive about it? No apology. No accountability. Just plausible deniability. And even if he stopped, he'd think he'd won. So I did something else. I stopped thinking like a coworker, and started thinking like a litigator. In law, if you want behavior to stop, you don't appeal to feelings. You increase the cost of continuing. I needed a solution that didn't involve confrontation, gave him no room to argue, ended the behavior permanently, and then I remembered something. Before I ever joined the firm, there had been a firm outing to a local lake. Team building nonsense. Sunburns. Too much beer. I found the old photos. And there it was. Chad. Wearing a backwards baseball cap. Flexing his arms for the camera beside one of the female employees. The problem? He had skinny arms, barely any biceps. He looked ridiculous. Not evil. Not offensive. Just profoundly unrespectable. The kind of photo a man like Chad would never want circulating. And that's when I smiled. I enlarged the photo to A4 size. Then I made multiple color copies. On the back, I wrote, "Please do not open my blinds. I prefer to keep them closed. Also, if you remove this photo, I will put up another, as I have made multiple copies." No insults. No threats. Just certainty. Before leaving work that day, I taped the photo to my blinds, eye level. The photo faced outward toward the blinds. The message faced inward, toward my office. If the blinds stayed closed, no one would ever see it. If someone opened them, everyone would. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I was excited. Not because I was fantasizing about humiliation. But because for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I'd set the conditions. And now, the next move wasn't mine.
I arrived at work earlier than usual. Not early enough to beat Chad in, he was always there before sunrise, but early enough that my footsteps echoed down the hallway. Every step toward my office carried a strange mix of anticipation and restraint. I turned the corner. And there it was. My office window. The blinds were closed. For a split second, I felt a flicker of disappointment. Had he stopped? Had the message worked immediately? I stood there, staring at the blinds, trying not to smile. Then I unlocked my door and stepped inside. And that's when I noticed something else. The note was gone. No paper. No photo. Just a faint strip of torn tape still clinging to the blinds. Someone had ripped it off, carefully enough not to open the blinds, but urgently enough to leave evidence behind. I stared at the tape for a long moment. Then I laughed. Not out loud. Just a slow exhale through my nose. Because suddenly, everything was clear. Here's exactly what must have occurred. Chad arrived early, like always. Walked down the quiet hallway. Reached my door. Same routine. Open blinds. Exposed desk. Feel superior. Except this time. The moment he touched the blinds, he saw himself. That photo. Big. Centered. Impossible to ignore. The backwards cap. The flex. The skinny arms. The version of himself he'd buried under expensive suits and authority. And then, he read the message. A simple statement of fact. Not a threat. A guarantee. If he removed it, another would appear. And another. Suddenly, Chad wasn't in control anymore. Think about the position he was in. If he opened the blinds, everyone would see the photo. Assistants. Associates. Clients walking down the hallway. His carefully crafted image, destroyed instantly. If he left the photo up, he'd have to stare at it every morning. A mirror he couldn't smash. So he did the only thing left. He ripped it down. Fast. Quiet. Probably angry. But notice what he didn't do. He didn't open the blinds. Because even in panic, he understood the risk. I didn't confront him. Didn't mention it. I calmly retaped another copy of the photo to the blinds later that afternoon, exactly the same way. Eye level. Same position. Same message. And I went home. The next day, I arrived even calmer than before. Blinds? Still closed. Inside the office? The photo was gone again. Same torn tape. Same silence. And that told me everything. This wasn't defiance anymore. This was damage control. At that point, I could have kept going. I had copies. I could have escalated. Could have waited a week and tried again. But here's something people don't realize about revenge that actually works. You stop the moment the behavior stops. Any further action isn't justice. It's ego. And ego is what got Chad into this mess in the first place. So I didn't put up another photo. I didn't say a word. And from that day on, no one ever touched my blinds again. Something changed after that. Not overtly, not dramatically. Chad never apologized. Never acknowledged it. But the comments stopped. No more jokes about my desk. No more public remarks. No more passive-aggressive nonsense. In meetings, he barely looked at me. And oddly enough, that was fine. Because respect doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it comes with distance. Here's the part most people miss. The win wasn't embarrassing Chad. The win was this: I took away his ability to mess with me without sacrificing my professionalism. I never raised my voice. Never complained. Never gave him a moment where he could say, "You're being unreasonable." Everything I did was quiet, measured, and legally immaculate. Which, honestly, is the most law partner revenge possible. Let me clear something up, because people always ask. My desk wasn't a mess. It was active work. Copies of documents I referenced constantly. Files were complete. Nothing missing. I could find what I needed instantly, much faster than if I had to walk back and forth to a filing cabinet. It looked chaotic to Chad because Chad needed things to look orderly to feel in control. I needed things to function. That difference mattered. Here's the funniest part. Chad obsessed over appearances. Suits pressed. Office pristine. Desk empty. And yet the only thing anyone remembers now? Is the image of him in that photo. Because all it took was one crack in the facade to reveal the insecurity underneath. Something interesting happened afterward. Other partners stopped mentioning my desk altogether. Not because they suddenly cared less, but because Chad had been the loudest voice. The instigator. Once he backed off, the commentary dried up. It turns out that a lot of group opinions are just one insecure person talking loudly enough that everyone else nods along. Silence reveals that fast. Here's a truth nobody tells you about professional environments. People will test what they can get away with. Not always overtly. Not always cruelly. But subtly. They'll touch your things. Make jokes at your expense. Push boundaries just enough to see if you push back. And if you don't? They keep going. What stopped Chad wasn't embarrassment. It was the realization that I was no longer a safe target. Let's break down why this hit so effectively. It was proportional, no destruction. No threats. No escalation. It was private but enforceable. Only one person fully understood the message, and that was enough. It was repeatable. The real power came from knowing I could do it again. It required no confrontation, which meant no conflict for him to win. He couldn't argue with it. He couldn't report it. He couldn't complain without admitting exactly what he'd been doing. That's what made him stop. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes when something irritating finally clicks back into place. When you walk into your workspace and it feels like yours again. When you're not bracing for disrespect. That peace. That's the real win. Do I hate Chad? No. I don't think about him at all anymore. Which, if we're being honest, is probably the outcome he feared most. People obsessed with image need attention. Taking away their influence hurts more than humiliation ever could. Sometimes, all you need to do is remind someone, calmly, creatively, and irrevocably, that every action has a cost. If this story hit home, if you've ever dealt with a coworker who tried to embarrass or undermine you, hit like and subscribe for more stories where quiet intelligence wins loud arrogance. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen that didn't involve a single word being spoken? Thanks for watching.